Cool.
What's up, everybody? This is Anthony D'Ambrosio from Supply Chain Solutions, and you are listening to the Ship Show Series podcast. Today is Thursday, August 24th, 2023, and this is episode 31 in our series this year. Now, we have a very special show for you today because in the house, joining us live from our HQ in the great state of Michigan, is one of our major strategic partners in the Asia Pacific Rim. We are honored to have them in the States currently, and they will be sharing their insights and knowledge about the market conditions. But we also want them to focus on a couple specific areas that I think our listeners will be super interested in. First, we're going to break down the China and Southeast Asian market in its current state. Next, we'll touch on the current state of the Chinese economy and how it will affect China's exports over the next 12 months. And finally, we'll talk a little bit about the effects the Section 301 tariffs have had on Chinese producers. So please join me in welcoming Orient Star Group, led by the amazing Jonathan Sang and his team. Orient Star was established in 1984 with the idea of providing global logistics services with a personal touch. They combined the tradition of service excellence with advanced technology to facilitate the most unique logistics services in the market today. They can accommodate all logistical requirements of every importer by offering a full range of tailor-made services, from inventory, PO management, warehouse, pre-distribution management. They are a full third-party logistics solutions provider, just like Supply Chain Solutions. They have 21 branches around Asia Pacific Rim with over 600 delegated professional staff and sophisticated IT systems, providing the most reliable services, high visibility on freight movement across the supply chain. So please allow me to introduce our esteemed guests. First, we have with us Howard Sang, Vice President of Business Development, who has been with Orient Star for 10 years. It's a family-owned company. Howard spends a lot of time with Billy and Richard traveling around the world, meeting their global partners, is involved in partnership development, many areas. And then next we have Billy Wang, the Director of Southeast Asia and India, who has been in the organization of Orient Star for over 18 years. He has an incredible background in the air freight market and is essentially a jack of all trades when it comes to supply chain and logistics. And I also like to welcome, who's in the background and not on camera right now, the amazing Richard Chu, Director of Sales and Marketing for the entire organization of Orient Star. And Richard also works very close with the container ship lines. And last but not least, we have my Ship Show co-host partner, the incomparable Jason Brand, joining us today. So Jason, I know that was a long intro.
No,
what is happening?
Not what's happening today. Honestly, we got a great show, though. The fact we've got Orient Star Group to talk about literally what's happening on the other side of the world, breaking it down for us, I think this is invaluable to all of our listeners. And if you've been with us for a while, you know, obviously we break down the Southeast Asia, China to U.S. lane weekly. You know, obviously we do it on our FMR mainly, but we're talking about it constantly. And they've got a great perspective here. So I'm really excited for them to break down some of those topics today. But also, I want to say one more thing before we let them kind of chat a little bit, talk about themselves and get going. So Jim, our co-founder, had the pleasure of visiting their facilities. And that was just, I think it was back in May, if I remember correctly.
May.
But I think he gave probably one of the greatest compliments a business owner could give. And he came back and essentially said, you know, they're like us, but on the other side of the world. And while they're substantially bigger, the idea that they're basically embodying this high quality service commitment, that they are incorporating a bunch of client specific needs into their solutions, and they've got this strong technology backbone, that means a lot. So many of you may not understand how international logistics works, but really, let me give you a real short breakdown of it. Each logistics company obviously has their footprint, and in their footprint, it's their responsibility to understand the market, understand the carriers, and understand how to operate in those regions. But if you're operating in a region where you aren't present or you're not the expert, you want to find a partner who you can trust to deliver the same service that you deliver to your customers. And that for us is Orient Star. So we're really happy to have them on the show. They help us on the other side of the world. So guys, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well said, Jason. Well said.
Well, let's dive right into it. So, okay, we want to talk about some pretty big issues, but let's start with a basic overview of the market in China and Southeast Asia. How is it in its current state? What are the rate levels like? What are the hottest local lanes? What are you guys predicting for the next 12 months?
So for the ocean freight out of Asia to USA, there are some breakdowns in carriers form alliance. So now we have 3 alliance. I mean, before I go into the rates, I just want to give some little bit of background of the alliance. So for Ocean Alliance, there are OOCL, Evergreen, Costco, CMA, and there's the other alliance called The Alliance, which is One, Hapag-Lloyd, Yangming, and Hyundai. And the last one is 2M, Maersk, and MSC. So basically, Orient Star have all the contracts with these carriers. So we have basically tier 1 rates with all these partners. And this is how we have our rate updates and also how we give our products to our customer. So I also want to talk about how the rate trends goes. So at the end of July, the rate actually went up for the August 1st GRI because there are lots of blank sailings, which is controlled by the carriers. They're trying to give it the shortage of supplies to create more demands for the shippers and the customers in Asia. So that is how the rate went up. So, but in the mid-August, the carriers announced another GRI, but actually the demand is not that strong yet. And also there are some extra loaders implemented, and also there are less blank sailings in the market. So this is how GRI built. So back to the rate levels, we are seeing there's another updates in August 24th. The overall rate had dropped from 100 to 125 reduction throughout all lanes. So the current Asia-based port rates from August 24th, let me just give some breakdowns. Like for West Coast, the rate level is around 1,800 to 2,000, and Vancouver Prince Rupert is around 100 lower than the West Coast, and East Coast is around 2,900 to 3,100. And Chicago via Long Beach and LA is 3,900 to 1,400. And by Vancouver is another $100 cheaper. And for Gulf area is 3,000 to 1,350. So overall, we are seeing this kind of rate gap is because the alliance differences. Like for the alliance and 2M, they are around 100, 150 lower than the Ocean Alliance rates, due to a different calling ports. Like for example, for East Coast, the Ocean Alliance code Mayher, and like the Alliance code Global. So the services difference, like which determine the rates are a bit different. So there are different products like we can provide the customer based on their needs. And also for September 1st, there will be an GRI coming. Carriers trying to implement another GRI.
Crazy.
So yeah, CMA was the first one to announce the rates. So we are seeing around 200 to 300 increase Like West Coast, it went up to 2200, East Coast 3200. But we are thinking it will be hard for carriers to actually increase this amount because due to the soft demands in the market.
Yeah.
And also, there will be a national holiday in China coming in October 1st. So we might see the rate goes up after September 15th.
Mhm.
But for September 1st, we are predicting the rates might not go up. But
Howard, real
yeah.
quick. So that's Golden Week, right?
Right, Golden
Starting
Week.
on October 1st. So one of the things I wanted to mention, though, that you were just talking about is it seems generally that the rates are flat right now. They might, have a slight uptick, up or down. But I think overall vessel capacity continues to trend higher than the demand. And I think it's keeping the rates from long lasting or, significant increases. So do you think that the carriers will continue to void sailings and use slow steaming? I know that they use this method to control the capacity and space on the rates, but it also, I think, allows them to save on the bunker cost. So do you think that that's going to continue? Because I have heard and studied in my research that after October, the carriers may have a hard time implementing any more general rate increases.
Yeah, usually the factories in Asia will be off during especially China, during the national holiday, the Golden Week. So it will be a very slow pickup after the October 1st, which is the slow season usually will be starting from the mid-October till maybe the end of the year.
Yeah.
And pick up again during the Chinese New Year, which
right
is
before the Chinese
right
New
before
Year,
the
right?
Chinese New Year. Should be February 10th this year.
Yeah.
Next year.
Next year.
Yeah. So this might be the market trend right now, and
maybe by mid-January we will see some surge on the demand.
yes.
As the factory will be rushing up for all the cargo.
Yeah, and for the blank selling programs, I think it had started back in 2019. Before that, carriers are not actually looking very closely with the blank sellings. That is how the rates fluctuate and drops to like a crazy level. Maybe we saw like less than 1,000, 3 digits in the past few years. And that is how they're trying to control the market to have a sustainable rate. So I believe carriers will continue the blank sellings program, but it also really depends on how the ocean freight goes. If the ocean freight went up pretty high, there always be some carriers will implement an extra loadings, which usually will make the market rates collapse.
Yep.
And by saying this level, I think around 2,000 to West Coast, carriers are really not in a hurry to deploy any extra loaders, so to keep the ocean freight as high as possible.
Thank you. That's excellent perspective.
I personally can't believe that these GRIs have been actually sticking a little bit lately, quite frankly, because if we go back to the beginning of July, I think we were seeing right at that $1,200 point for the just get to California, and now we're right under 2,000. And I'm almost thinking that after Golden Week, just as you guys were saying, it's kind of the end of the hurrah this year, and it's really, in my opinion, not going to pick up as well until we've got that Chinese New Year rush. And I'm really curious to see how big it is this year because demand hasn't been around, so maybe it will be bigger than we expect.
Right.
Yeah, and also I think lots of people are more focusing on those express service due to like the pandemic in the past few years. Like they cannot get the space, they do not have the service out of Asia to the States. So there are more express service out of the market, such as like CMA, EXX service, Hyundai PSX, Matson COX service. And recently, the Costco also launched a express service out of Shanghai. It's called CN service. It calls loading port is Shanghai to Long Beach, and with a transit time of 13 days. This is the reason hottest line out of China, especially there are lots of e-commerce goods.
Right.
Like the growing of e-commerce, like Amazon in US, there are lots of demands for the e-commerce to ship out of Asia. So that there is more and more carriers trying to grab this piece of business. So I mean the transit time is similar with Medicine because Medicine is always the number one player for the express service out of Asia.
Mhm.
So Costco is trying to catch up, and they also launched this service a couple of days ago, and they have very competitive rate out of Shanghai. So for example, for Medicine, they're providing 5,700 with a transit time of 15 days out of Shanghai to Long Beach. And but Costco is actually offering 2,350.
Whoa.
Yeah. That's really interesting, you know, Howard. That's a great point about Matson too, because let's remember, folks, on the West Coast in LA and Long Beach, Matson also is a marine terminal operator, and they have their own terminal. So during the pandemic, when there was a lot of dwell times at the anchorage before, you know, there was space for vessels to dock, Matson ships really weren't delayed very much because their terminals, they would bring their ships right in. So, you know, one of the other things I wanted to ask Howard and Billy also, as we're talking about rates, is we also do, as you guys know, a lot of Asia to Europe shipments. And we know that on August 1st, you know, there was a general rate increase that was successful, but we've seen that the rates started to decline a little bit. And I think many of the steamship lines are planning to introduce fresh capacity because, as you guys well know, there's going to be a lot of new tonnage coming into the global rotation next year. Do you think this is really going to upset the balance with all this new capacity coming in?
I mean, like during the pandemic times, the carriers make so much money, and they do a lot of investment, especially in deploying the new vessels in the market. So I think 2024 will be a critical year. Like the supply is way more than the demands, and even though there's like a IMO regulations to control the
Like retire the old
retire the
ships,
ocean, but it didn't actually applies to all the carriers. They always have their ways, like slower the vessel
Yeah.
or install a scrubber. So
Yeah.
2024, I mean, also with the world economy right now, the demands is not that strong. So we will see some interesting contract negotiation in next year, April.
Yeah, and we have been hearing that some of the carriers, they request for postponement on the delivery of new ships with the shipyard. So it really depends if what's the deal and what's the delivery date of those new ships, and it will be an interesting year to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, because go ahead, Jason. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. So I love that you brought up the IMO as well, because that with those new regulations as to carbon, I was assuming what was going to happen was there was going to be a shedding of older ships to kind of replace it with the new ships. But that's honestly, I think if they were able to push that through as far as postponing the delivery, that was needed. Seriously, when we were watching how many TUs were supposed to come online just this year. And Anthony and I were like, the market can't support this right now. It's just too much.
Yeah, and the thing is just to finish up on this one point about the fleet growth. I mean, it's literally massive right now, and Billy makes a good point about some of the container ship line owners are trying to delay delivery of those vessels that have been completed because, you know, with this new wave of tonnage coming into the rotation, ocean carriers will not be able to maintain the sort of rates and tweak them up, you know, the way they used to, especially once we get to the end of October. And I think after that, all bets are off because they're going to be dealing with the seasonality and the new tonnage coming in. And, I read in the Journal of Commerce here in the States that Sea Intelligence, which is one of those great reporting agencies, said that the Trans-Pacific vessel supply will see a massive gain in the next 10 weeks, averaging almost 22% growth over 2022 on a weekly basis. So, as Howard and Billy said, I think we're going to have to keep our fingers on the pulse of that and see how that plays out. But I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, one more quick thing I want to bring up. Okay, guys, where are you guys seeing capacity going right now? What are the hot lanes regionally in Southeast Asia currently?
Well, basically carriers treat all the base port as the same rate level. So meaning like China rate like Shanghai, Ningbo, Yantian, the rate is the same as like Southeast Asian countries. The direct call one, like Kai Mat Wan Dao in Vietnam, like Port Klang in Malaysia and Singapore. So other than these direct calling ports, there are a lot of Southeast Asian countries port which connect by feeder. Like for example, Indonesia, like Jakarta, Surabaya, Semarang, and Sihanoukville in Cambodia, Manila in Philippines, Cebu in Philippines. So all this will have a kind of a origin arbitrary, and they will be ranging from like 200 to 450 per containers, the origin arbitrary. And other than that, in general, for direct calling ports, the rate is the same as China-based port.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Move on to the next question. Are we ready? This is a big one. All right, guys. Okay, so let me break it down. So, okay, Anthony and I, we've talked about this quite a bit. Obviously, coming out of the pandemic, there was a really big, swing. We had obviously the insane rates, the insane demand, and then that's kind of gone down. So when we think about the current state of the Chinese economy, obviously we have that Evergrande situation. But what's your take right now on the Chinese economy, and how do you think it's going to affect China's exports over the next 12 months?
Well,
it's a great question.
Yeah, I would say Chinese economy is struggling. Like just some figures to share. Like the China government target GDP growth for this year is 5%, which is the lowest in decades. And then in terms of the GDP growth in Q2 this year, it was 6.3% increase year on year. And then it was 0.8% increase a quarter on quarter. So which kind of like a slow like recovery. And then there are multiple factors contribute to a slow GDP growth of this year. First of all, is almost like 3 years zero COVID restriction or the policies of China government, so that which limits the recovery pace of China economy. And second one, internally, China is facing the liquidity issues of the Chinese developers. Like I think everyone knows, like Evergrande, a Chinese developer who just filed the Chapter 15 in US for bankruptcy protection, and then which have like 300 billion of liabilities in China. And then the next one, I mean, the hottest one now is Century Garden, which also is suffering on the liquidity issues. Mm-hmm. And then externally, in terms of the export, the tension between China and US also like kind of slow down the growth of China GDP. And then so Howard, would you share more on the domestic side, like on the consumption?
Yeah. So for China economy, what we're seeing right now, the domestic consumption is also not very strong. I think it is because, like Billy said, there are 3 years of restriction, lockdown, quarantine, and people now are just more focusing on the service-wise, the service consumption. So actually this year, there are a lot of like concerts and big sports events traveling happens in China.
Like, can you imagine, like, after 3 years lockdown in China,
Mhm.
I mean, people are kind of
dying
like
to.
dying.
You know what? Real quick on that, because I feel like I remember hearing something about how the last Chinese New Year there was more travel than ever before, or something along those lines. Oh my gosh! Okay, keep going. I love that.
So we are seeing a lot of increase, especially for this service consumption. Like people are just want to have a gathering with their friends and
Yep.
family. So this is how actually like a service consumption grows so much.
Yeah, but it hurts the economy. Like,
Mhm.
if people are buying stuff, like for example, automobiles. If domestic internally, like Chinese
Mhm.
people, if they buy more automobiles, it will create a chain effect to all the supplies, like for the door, steel industry. I mean, for everything, right?
Right.
But if the consumer is spending more on the services, traveling or catering, the kind of chain effect, the domino effect will be limited compared with like spending on the commodities. So that's also another reason to limit the growth of China GDP.
Yeah. I mean.
Yeah, and go ahead, Howard. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So I just want to elaborate a little bit more on the service consumption. Just by the number is really amazing. So from 2022 to 2023, like China's service economy has a rise approximately 520 million US dollar to $650 million US dollars compared 2022 to 23. It's a 25% growth. So we're actually seeing there are still a lot of Chinese people have the money in their pocket, but they're just not willing to invest in real estate or
Or
buying
in commodities or products. Yeah,
Right.
they
Yeah.
rather spend it on traveling,
Traveling.
services, things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a good point that Howard brings up, as well as Billy, because I think somewhere I read that the retail sales as an indicator of consumer demand in China rose 3.1% in June from the same period in 2022. So that's really seen as a strong point, but not strong enough, according to some of the analysts internally in China. So, but on the flip side, when we think about the industrial output, which measures the activity in the manufacturing, mining, and the utility sectors, they just knocked it out of the park and beat all of the analyst expectations, because that has been rising by 4.4% in June compared to the same month a year earlier. So, it's interesting dynamic here. I think China's policymakers are not really having to fight inflation, but they may end up having to contend with the opposite, which might be deflation from some of the things I read. I don't know if Billy or Howard agree with that, because one of the articles I read about falling prices due to weak demand,
For those solid goods
could be an issue. Yeah.
You're absolutely correct. Like the whole world, not only US but also Europe. I mean, the whole world is kind of like facing the inflation issues, while China is there is chance that China will goes into deflation, and so that's another hot topic that the policymaker and the China government need to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, mainly what I've read is when you have like a state-owned banking system, all the fears of like a major housing issue, they're really kind of put slightly at ease, because you're able to kind of financially be a little bit more agile. So as a result of that, if there is a massive situation with Evergrande, I think it still will kind of be blunted by the ability to kind of, at least financially kind of blunted. Something I read said it was around the main asset for Chinese domestic citizens was a house, and it represented about 50% of their wealth. Now, this is an interesting component, thinking that, with the Evergrande situation, with how much development's been going on, and the idea of paying on your mortgage prior to the house being completed. And I think President Xi came out and said, hey, don't do that. Essentially, like, you need to have the house. You shouldn't be speculating in that realm. I think it might be a necessary reset. I don't think it's going to be. I think it will kind of help the market in general. But what do you guys take on that?
Well, it's not really a scam. It's kind of a market norms in China and Hong Kong that the developer will pre-sell the property at a discounted price so that the developer will have the fund to build up the apartment. So it's more on the regulations, I would say, like how you control or how much the developer could pre-sell in order to raise the fund. And then, it could be like a bubble if you don't control it rightly. And then, but it's kind of a market norms in Asia that the developer will pre-sell the property at a discounted price.
Makes sense. I can see that. Yeah. Now, something else interesting I did not realize until all of this kind of started coming out that Evergrande is also in the EV market, and they've actually been pretty intensely entering the European market. I put this down in my notes here, but it was, so of the new electric vehicles sold in Europe so far this year, 8% were made by Chinese brands. This is up from 6% last year and 4% in 2021. So really steady growth.
Right.
It's fascinating though, because it's if you think about the European consumer, they haven't really bought onto Tesla even yet, right? So there was a survey done by YouGov, specifically looking at the European consumer, and essentially of the 95% of everyone surveyed who knew Tesla, they said only 10% of them would buy a Tesla, and then of 100% of everyone surveyed, 1% would buy a Chinese car. But the main hurdle that was mentioned was that most of the brands were unknown to the European public. So you had MG, who's a very well-known brand.
Right.
But then beyond that, some of the other more premium brands who are coming into the European market still don't have that notoriety yet. What's your opinion on the next couple of years, how EV is going to continue to grow, or do you think it's going to hit some bumps in the road for the European market?
It will continue to grow. First of all, just talk about the China market alone.
For sure.
It's huge. And China government is promoting the EV because of environmental protection. And the EV is also part of the Made in China 2025.
Yeah.
2025. So EV is a kind of a focused industry for China to develop. The Made in China 2025 was set in 2015. And so you can see, like, after the past couple of years of development, the EV car is so popular in China right now. And then we do believe that it will get more and more popular. And you mentioned about MG, right? So there is another brand which acquired by China automaker years ago, which is Volvo. And then they also launched an EV. So I think the name is Polestar, right? So anyway, the trend will just growing. And because the domestic market in China alone is so big and it's not yet saturated.
One quick clarification. Can you just, for our viewers, can you break down the Made in China 2025 initiative?
Okay, so I have a note right here. So actually, Made in China 2025, like when people think about Chinese product, they usually think of like a cheaper,
economical
scale, and so China government
OEM,
right. So China trying to like reverse this kind of mentality. So they're aiming for high quality product,
innovation,
lots of digitization, and also having some strong Chinese brands to influence the world.
Gotcha.
So so they're focusing on some projects or products, which is lots of financial incentive to this related industry, such as semiconductor,
the EV,
satellite, robots, passenger flights, green energy, high-speed railways, ocean engineering, and also the EV is a huge market that, your colleagues May, like she traveled to Shanghai in May, back in May. So she see almost 50% of the vehicles are EV, which is really huge growing
Yeah,
market.
it's a huge growth.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Question too. So domestically, are Chinese citizens buying Chinese auto brands now at a greater rate? Would you expect?
Mhm.
That's
Yes.
awesome. That is
Mhm.
awesome. That's kind of that ground level adoption that's needed, right? I mean, that's kind of the way we view it. But yeah.
Yeah, and of course there will be a lot of competition among the automobile companies. So, but the leading brands like BYD, and then so
Mhm.
those will be
Right.
keep like improving
Yeah.
or gaining the market share. And then some of the new startup may got like fade out because due to the competition.
Mhm.
So, but the market as a whole, the EV market as a whole will only getting bigger.
Yeah, just BYD you mentioned
Yeah.
about it. It's a second largest like company who export out of China. So
Right.
which is pretty impressive, like how EV grows.
Yeah, it's not only passenger car. BYD also get involved in
Lots of
a lot of
Mhm.
like bus, like coach bus, like the
Mhm.
big one. So it's not only about the family, like the individual cars. It's about the industrial use. Yeah. So it's everything basically.
Right.
Yeah.
It's almost taking a page from Volvo's book, right? Kind of being in all those different sectors as well, all over the world.
Sure.
That's
Right.
Anthony. You want to add to this real quick?
No. I was agreeing with everyone. I think you guys were spot on.
Well, I think it leads right into the 301 tariffs perfectly because, okay, so right now it's September 30th when we've got to determine if we're going to keep or get rid of the 301 tariffs or modify them. And quite frankly, it's been relatively quiet. There's been, from our politicians, we've seen a lot of pushback from the exclusion list. In general, a lot of U.S. companies obviously are kind of pained by the experience of the 301 tariffs. And I think on that same vein, dealing with inflation as well, and now having to utilize different suppliers has been a little bit more of a challenge, and it's kind of accelerated cost increases. So I guess when it comes down to the 301 tariffs, what happens if they're reversed? How would it affect the region? Because what we've seen is a lot of Chinese companies moving to neighboring countries, setting up manufacturing facilities, and then, continuing business through a different country. So how does, if the 301s were reversed, do you think you'd see a flip back to China? Or do you think these kind of satellite companies that have been built would still kind of be utilized and maybe new companies would be entering in the Chinese market? How do you view it?
So before you answer that question, let's just, for our listeners, recap the tariffs, okay? So mostly everybody's familiar, but back in 2018 and 2019, the White House, as we all know, initiated what's called a Section 301 investigation regarding, some alleged violations of China's obligations with regard to intellectual property. And as a result of that, the White House ordered what are now called the 301 duties. So they are 25% increased taxes on $250 billion worth of Chinese imports that, as Jason has said, has been in effect for several years. So Howard and Billy, why don't you just take that away and tell us what's on your mind and what you're thinking about that if that was reversed?
I mean, it is very related with the Made in China 2025 we just mentioned, because the idea or the project was launched in 2015 May. So it kind of gave the rest of the world, like Chinese can actually produce a high quality products or commodity. So this is kind of trigger like how USA want to give this tariff for the Chinese exporting goods in 2018. So in 2018, there's a 25% of tariff to the goods exporting out of China, and also China react back to some imports. I mean, U.S. exporting goods to China also. I think this will always be an ongoing tariff.
I don't think it will be I don't think it will get cancelled, the 301. And I don't think it's related to like the ownership of the factory in the surrounding country. The major objective is to maintain the competitiveness of U.S. manufacturer, right? It's not really targeting on the Chinese-owned company. So I do think that and given that next year will be the president election year of U.S., so at this point, I don't think the government will withdraw the 301 at this moment. It will be continued.
Yeah.
Most likely will be extended, I think.
Right. So
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Go ahead, gentlemen.
Oh, I mean, like besides Section 301, because Chinese government also launched a project called China Standard 2035. So it will be more focusing on this high technology such as 5G, internet, cloud-based service. So which a lot is related with the semiconductor. So this is how the White House had announced the Chip and Science Act of 2022. So I think this trade wars or like trying to be more competitive in US or China will be an ongoing thing, just like Billy said.
Yeah, and I mean in global supply chain, I would say like right before the 301, actually the factories have been investing heavily to Southeast Asian countries, mainly because of the increasing manufacturing costs in China. So the switching trend has been like growing. The 301 is just another stimulation to the trend, like diversification of international trade. So in terms of global supply chain, I do think that importers or the buyers will be more diversified. China will be the world factory. At this point, I don't think any country or any region could pick up the production capacity as China. So China will remain the world factory, and then it really depends the tension, how the leader in China and US to resolve it, and so that we will have a healthier international trade between China and US.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point, Billy. And it's interesting because even though the U.S. trade representative is, as we all know, is considering whether to keep these tariffs or not, there's going to be a 4-year review, which is actually ongoing while we're waiting for the U.S. Trade Representative's decision on extending the exclusions. And this goes back to the Trade Act of 1974, which reviews the effectiveness and economic impact of the Section 301 actions every 4 years. So, they're reviewing this right now, but I think it's all about the relationship between the USA and China. And, hopefully things are just going to settle down and smooth out, and we could just get back to doing business together pre-pandemic.
Yeah,
And I think everybody was enjoying, the business more so than now, unfortunately, because of the volatility. Yeah.
Yeah, we do see some good progress. Like there are more and more U.S. government officials visiting China recently, like Yellen earlier in July, and so hopefully with the constructive talks between the government officials, things will get better.
Yeah, this date's actually a pretty good time, right? I mean, it's far enough out from any of the bruising situations where I think some of these talks can be more productive, and I think it will actually lead. My hopes. I agree with you, Billy. I agree with you also, Anthony. My hope is that after September 30th, maybe there'll be such a robust exclusion system that will slowly kind of see this chipped away over time. The chance of it being reversed on the 30th of September, I think, is highly unlikely. That would be shocking. But yeah, guys, we are doing a little too far on time here. It's 45. I appreciate all of our discussion. We're just plowing through here. Anthony, do you have any final questions you want to ask?
Well, I just want to ask one quick question. So, how do you feel that relationship is right now between Taiwan and mainland China? Do you think it's just going to stay the same, or do you think there's going to be more volatility as we go into 2024?
That's also a big.
I know it's a hot potato question, so
I'm from
if
Taiwan.
we'd like to rather not answer that, that's fine. But I'm sure our listeners were thinking about that. So none of us have a crystal ball, right?
Yeah. For personally, I'm from Taiwan, so there will also be an election next year in January. So it really depends on the which party is more pro U.S. market or pro China market, but we still haven't really see who will be elected yet. And I mean, Taiwan and China U.S. relationship is very sensitive, and like how a small region like Taiwan and stuck in between these two strong power economy and politics. It's really pretty difficult for me to give you a clear answer right now. But I think it will change a bit if there's any changes in the next year election.
For sure.
Tension remains, but there will be no. Hopefully, there will be no like major conflict.
Yes.
I mean, I mean, no one can afford it. No one can afford it.
Absolutely. Now, Howard and Billy, do you guys have anything that you want to tell our listeners? Anything more about Orient Star, about our amazing partnership, or any other things you'd like to add?
It's just we are very happy to be here. It's our first time visiting SCS headquarters here, and we are very impressed with your service, and likewise our service. I think we are very connected with our products, and also our strength in Asia could help SCS have a really good growth in US market as well.
Yeah.
So
We're very grateful.
Oh, Billy, please.
So it's our honor to be here in Gramer's headquarters, and we find a lot of similarity on our core value between Orient Star Group and SCS, and we do look forward to growing our partnership to the next level.
Absolutely. And now listen, is May there in the conference room with you? Can we get her to come on camera real quick? We want to send a shout out to our amazing Director of Global Client Development, May Lebray. I'm sorry for embarrassing you, but we want to thank you for helping bring this together today. You've done an amazing, amazing job. Thank you, May. We're so grateful.
Honestly, we're honored to have you guys on the show. We really appreciate your point of view. It's been a joy, and what we're going to be trying to do in the future is bring these two gentlemen on again, because hey, we all four of us here know how challenging the supply chain world can be and has been, and particularly right now, how much stuff is changing and how rapidly it's changing. So we really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you. Anthony, how do we end up our shows?
So normally we say make it a great day, but today we're going to say that in Mandarin. So please correct me if I'm wrong. Shita Chengwei Yigi Wida Di Rizi. So please let me know if I said that right.
I think you got a couple of your tones wrong there, Anthony. But
I can feel it. I can feel it.
Let's get the. Can you guys break down the correct way of saying that very quick?
Probably will need Anthony to say that again.
Bita Chengwei Yigi Weda Di Rizi. I probably butchered that, guys. But normally I say make it a great day. So why don't you close our show today with how it would be said in Mandarin or Cantonese?
祝大家有美好的一天。
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, May, and thank you, Jason. Make it a great day, guys.